Imagine for a second that you're walking down the street, right?
Yeah.
And you just happen to find a piece of mail on the sidewalk.
Okay.
You pick it up and you realize it's written to someone else living in a totally different culture like thousands of years ago.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now imagine opening that letter, reading one random sentence in the middle of page 2, and immediately asking yourself, so what does this mean for my commute to work today?
Right. Which sounds completely absurd when you put it like that.
It sounds ridiculous, but honestly, I mean, that is exactly how most of us are taught to read the most famous, most heavily scrutinized book in human history.
It really is.
Right.
We treat ancient, complex documents like a daily horoscope.
Yeah.
Just, looking for a quick personal application.
Yeah,
And when that doesn't work, frustration sets in immediately.
exactly. And that frustration is why, for a lot of people, diving into Bible study doesn't feel like a gentle on-ramp. It feels incredibly intimidating.
Oh, absolutely.
It can feel like walking into a graduate-level literature class without having taken a single prerequisite course. You're handed this massive text, and everyone around you seems to just inherently know how to read it.
And you're just sitting there, right, hoping the professor doesn't call on you.
Yeah. So welcome to this deep dive. We are talking directly to you, the listener, especially if you've ever felt that wave of guilt sitting at your kitchen table at 6 a.m.
Coffee in hand.
Coffee in hand, trying to get through a paragraph and just feeling totally, completely lost.
That feeling of being lost is the absolute definition of imposter syndrome for so many readers.
Oh, for sure.
You open the book, and there's this immediate, heavy pressure to extract something profoundly life-changing right on the spot.
And today, our mission is to completely dismantle that pressure. Today's deep dive is based on an interpretation guide for something called Inductive Bible Study, or IBS.
Right.
The entire goal here is to demystify the process and hand you the actual practical tools to become a confident, independent reader.
Yes.
You won't need to constantly rely on someone else to tell you what the text says. But before we get into the tools, we need to clarify a term. The guide specifically calls this inductive Bible study. What exactly does inductive mean here?
That is the perfect place to start. So to understand inductives, it really helps to look at its opposite, which is deductive.
Okay.
Most of us naturally read the text deductively. That means we start with a premise or like a feeling.
Like, I feel anxious today, let me go find a verse to comfort me.
Exactly. You start with your conclusion, and then you hunt for data to support it. But inductive study is the exact opposite.
Okay, so how does that work?
It means you start purely with the raw data of the text. You examine the words, the grammar, the historical setting.
You're just looking at the facts.
Right. And you let that evidence drive you toward a conclusion, regardless of how you happen to feel that morning.
Okay, let's unpack this, because transitioning from deductive to inductive, that requires a massive mindset shift.
It really does.
The guide hits right at the core of this by stating that interpretation is a discovery process, not a creative writing exercise.
That is the foundational truth of this entire approach.
Right.
We are not trying to invent a meaning, We are trying to uncover the meaning that is already there.
Right.
The guide specifically maps out a communication chain to explain why this matters. It flows like this. It starts with the Holy Spirit,
Okay.
who inspires the human author, who writes the written scripture, which is finally picked up by the human reader.
Wait, hold on. Let me just play devil's advocate here. Isn't the point of reading this to figure out what the verse means to me? If you sit in almost any modern book club or discussion group, the very first question the leader asks is usually, so what did this passage mean to you?
Right, yeah.
It's all about our personal emotional reaction to it.
This raises an important question, and honestly, it's probably the biggest hurdle for the modern reader.
Oh, definitely.
We are heavily conditioned by our culture to make ourselves the center of the text. But if we look at that communication chain spirit, author, scripture, reader, the goal isn't to invent a personal subjective meaning.
Right, because that breaks the chain.
Exactly. The goal is to discover what the original author meant when they wrote it to their original audience. If we skip straight to what it means to me,
We are bypassing the human author entirely.
we really are. We're basically hijacking the text.
It's like taking that letter we found on the street, taking a pen, crossing out the recipient's name, and just writing our own name in.
Precisely. Which is why the guide introduces the rule of literal interpretation, or what it calls a plain sense.
Plain sense? Okay.
The rule is simple. If the plain sense of the words makes good sense, we shouldn't seek another symbolic sense unless the text absolutely demands it.
Okay.
You start with the normal, natural, customary meaning of the words.
But wait, let me push back on that for a second. The Bible is famous for its massive variety of genres, right? There's poetry, there are parables, there are these wild apocalyptic visions. If we just wrote it literally, aren't we going to end up believing there's an actual physical, multi-headed beast coming out of the literal ocean?
That's a great distinction to make. When the guide says literal, it doesn't mean being thick-headed or ignoring metaphors.
Okay.
Reading something literally means interpreting it according to its literary genre. So a literal reading of a poem recognizes that it's a poem.
And treats its metaphors as metaphors.
Exactly. A literal reading of a historical account treats it as history. The plain sense rule just means you don't over-spiritualize a basic historical sentence into some secret, mystical code.
It grounds you.
Yes. It reminds you that these were real letters written by real people who genuinely wanted to be understood by the people they were writing to.
That makes a lot of sense. But to find this plain sense, we obviously can't just stare at a single sentence forever. We have to look at the environment it lives in.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the first core pillar of this inductive process: context.
Context is your anchor. Formally, the guide defines immediate context as the verses directly before and after your passage.
Right.
And the specific action step they give, and this is a non-negotiable rule, is that you must read at least the full paragraph to identify the main topic.
You cannot just read a single verse and hope to understand it.
No, never.
I love the analogy the guide uses here. It compares context to a neighborhood.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
It's like looking at a Zillow listing for a single house. You see a cropped photo of this beautiful, pristine craftsman home. It looks amazing.
Fresh paint, perfect porch.
Exactly. But if you don't zoom out on the map to see the neighborhood, you have absolutely no idea what you're actually looking at.
Right.
You don't know if that beautiful house is next to a serene, quiet park, or if it's sharing a chain-link fence with a noisy 24-hour manufacturing plant.
Yeah.
You have to know the neighborhood to understand the reality of the house.
That's a brilliant way to picture it. The house might look great, but its value and its reality are entirely defined by where it sits. The guide explicitly states that immediate context is your primary safeguard against error. In fact, studying Avos in isolation is listed as one of the biggest, most common mistakes you can make in biblical interpretation.
Let's actually ground this in a real-world example to show how dangerous isolation can be. Let's take a famous verse like Philippians 4.13.
Oh, classic. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me.
Exactly. If you isolate that, if you just crop the Zillow photo people, use it deductively to mean, I can win this football game, or I can get this promotion at work.
Right. They make it about personal achievement.
Yeah.
But if you zoom out to the neighborhood, the paragraph surrounding it, the author, Paul, is writing from a Roman prison.
Wait, really? A prison?
Yes. And the sentences immediately before it are about how he has learned to be content whether he is well-fed or starving,
Wow.
whether he is living in plenty or living in poverty.
So the all things he can do isn't about winning a marathon. It's about enduring extreme hardship and poverty without losing his faith. By zooming out to the neighborhood, the entire meaning of the verse completely shifts. If you isolate it, you can make it say whatever you want it to say.
When you force yourself to read the whole paragraph, you are forcing yourself to acknowledge the author's actual train of thought.
Yeah.
You are stepping into their neighborhood on their terms.
Rather than dragging their words into your neighborhood.
Precisely.
Okay, so the neighborhood protects us from wildly misunderstanding the general topic. But once I know what neighborhood I'm in, I still need to know how to navigate its specific streets.
Yes.
Which brings us to the second pillar. Here's where it gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah.
Because the second pillar is syntax.
I can usually hear the hesitation in a reader's voice the moment the word syntax is introduced.
Honestly, syntax sounds like a terrifying grammar test from middle school. I'm having flashbacks to standing at a chalkboard, sweating, trying to diagram sentences while everyone stared at me.
It sounds so academic.
It does. Do I need an English degree to do this? Am I going to have to identify dangling participles and split infinitives?
Not at all. You can take a deep breath.
Oh, good.
The guide provides a very calming, highly practical definition. Syntax is simply the way words and phrases work together to create meaning.
Okay, that's not too bad.
That's it. During your initial reading, you might have just noticed some connecting words. But here, in the interpretation phase, you are confirming what those connections actually mean. Think of them as road signs.
Road signs. Okay, I like that. That is infinitely less intimidating than middle school grammar.
Right. The guide tells us to look for specific road sign words and ask what the author's doing with them. Let's use a mundane example first.
Sure.
Take the word for. When you see the word for, it usually signals a reason. The author's about to tell you why they just said what they said.
So it's pointing backward to a cause.
Exactly, like, I am carrying an umbrella, for it is raining. The for points directly to the reason.
Got it. Another one the guide mentions is the phrase, so that.
Yes, so that signals a result or a purpose. I brought an umbrella so that I wouldn't get wet.
Okay, tracking with you.
And then there's the word but. But signals a contrast. It's a massive shift in direction.
Right. Like, it was raining, but I forgot my umbrella.
Exactly. The entire trajectory of the sentence pivots on that one little word.
So tracking these road signs forces us to follow the author's logic before we accidentally insert our own. Let's apply this to an actual text to see how much power these little words hold.
Good idea.
If you look at a famous passage like Ephesians chapter 2, it says, "For by grace you have been saved through faith."
Right. The for connects it to the previous paragraph.
Exactly. Then a few sentences later, it says, "Not a result of works, so that no one may boast."
Yes. So that is a road sign giving you the direct result of the grace.
And then the very next verse starts with, "For we are his workmanship."
Which gives the reason again.
Right. If we don't pay attention to those road signs, we're just driving off-road. We might read the sentence about works and completely disconnect it from the sentence about grace.
That happens all the time.
If we ignore the syntax, we will inevitably insert our own logic into the passage to make the sentences connect. We'll build bridges the author never intended to build.
That is the precise danger. The road signs keep you strictly on the author's intended path. You are following their logic step by step, rather than just skimming for words that jump out at you.
And following those grammatical road signs inevitably leads you to a final destination. Which brings us to the third pillar in this inductive study process, authorial intent.
Authorial intent is the destination. It is the absolute bottom line.
Okay.
It is the moment in your study where you summarize exactly what the author was trying to communicate to their original audience.
That sounds great in theory, but how do we actually pin that down without just guessing?
Yeah.
Because even after looking at context and syntax, it still feels like there's room for my brain to accidentally inject my own modern opinions into the summary.
The guide offers a highly practical, almost mechanical action step to prevent that specific problem.
Oh, awesome. What is it?
It tells you to write down one clear sentence, starting with these exact words. The author is saying that.
Oh, I see. The author is saying that. It completely removes the phrases "I think" or "I feel" from the equation.
Exactly. You are forced to finish that sentence from the author's perspective. And your summary must fit the flow of thought in the paragraph you just read.
So you can't just make it up.
No, it must strictly avoid forcing any outside ideas into the text. If your sentence doesn't align with the neighborhood context, and it doesn't align with the syntax road signs you just tracked, you have to scrap it.
Scrap it, go back and try again.
Yep.
So what does this all mean? Let's synthesize these three pillars. We look at the neighborhood, that's context. We follow the road sign, that's syntax.
Right.
And we do all of that to arrive at the destination, which is authorial intent.
Beautifully summarized.
We are doing this rigorous work precisely so we can hear what the author actually meant before we even begin to decide what it means to us or how to apply it to our Tuesday morning commute.
That is the interpretive cycle in a nutshell. And it's important to recognize that it is a cycle.
Meaning it's not just a one-and-done checklist.
Right. What you observe affects how you interpret, and sometimes your interpretation makes you realize you missed a road sign.
Which sends you back to observe the text even more carefully.
Exactly. It's a highly dynamic, active process.
It is a phenomenal process. It takes the mystical guesswork out of it. But I have to ask the natural follow-up question here. What happens when I hit a dead end?
Yes.
Let's say I've checked the neighborhood, I've tracked every road sign, I've tried to write the author is saying that sentence, and I'm just genuinely completely stuck. Do I just immediately pull out my phone and Google what a famous pastor thinks about the verse?
What's fascinating here is how the guide anticipates that exact moment of frustration, because it happens to everyone.
Good to know I'm not alone.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
The guide provides what it calls the IBS tool hierarchy, and it is structured exactly like a traffic light.
A traffic light, okay.
The cardinal rule of this hierarchy is that you must use these tools only after you have completed the first three pillars. The text itself must speak before anyone else does.
Okay, I love a good system. Let's break this traffic light down. What is the green light? What is the very first tool we are allowed to reach for when we need outside help?
The green light, your first priority, is translation comparison.
Translation comparison.
If a verse is unclear, your first step is simply to check 2 or 3 different English Bible versions to see where the translators agree or how they differ in their phrasing.
Oh, I see. So it's like getting a second opinion from another doctor.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
You aren't asking a totally different medical field for advice. You're just looking at the exact same data through the lens of another highly qualified expert to make sure the diagnosis translates clearly to you.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Mm-hmm.
You are still dealing directly with the text itself, just utilizing slightly different renderings of it. Very often, reading it phrased slightly differently clears up the confusion instantly.
Okay, that makes sense. But what if that doesn't work?
Now, if that doesn't work, we move to the yellow light. This means proceed with caution.
Okay, caution.
There are 2 specific tools here. The first is cross-references.
Meaning looking at other parts of the Bible to explain the part you're currently reading.
Yes, but the guide is very strict here. You use other parts of the Bible to confirm your interpretation, never to create it.
Never to create it. Yeah.
You cannot, under any circumstances, import a completely different meaning from another book into your current text.
Wait, can you give me an example of that?
Sure. Just because a specific word means one thing in a highly poetic psalm written by David does not mean it means the exact same thing in a gritty historical letter written by Paul.
Right, because they are entirely different neighborhoods. You can't just airlift a house from ancient Jerusalem and drop it into a neighborhood in ancient Rome and expect it to make sense to the locals.
Precisely. The context always rules. You can't cross-reference away the immediate context.
Got it. And what's the second yellow light tool?
The second yellow light tool is historical background.
Okay, so this would be investigating ancient customs, cultural settings, political climates, things like that.
Yes, but again, proceed with caution. The guide says to investigate these only if the passage is truly confusing without that historical information.
Really, I feel like people love diving into the history.
They do, but it can be distracting. The key phrase the guide uses is, background illuminates the text, it does not control it.
Illuminates, but does not control.
Exactly. It's helpful context, but it should never override the plain sense of the words on the page.
It's like turning on a porch light at that Zillow house. It helps you see the intricate details of the porch better, but doesn't change the foundational structure of the house itself.
Exactly right. It just helps you see what's already there. Which finally brings us to the red light.
The red light.
The absolute last resort in your tool belt.
Commentaries.
Commentaries. The guide strongly emphasizes that commentaries are at the very bottom of the hierarchy. You use them only when you are completely stuck after trying everything else. Or, when you have finished your own study and just want to double-check your work against an expert.
Right.
The rule is absolute. Never let a commentary replace your own study.
Let's dig into the why of that for a second. Why are commentaries a red light? I mean, if these are written by brilliant scholars who know Greek and Hebrew, why wouldn't I just want to read their thoughts first to save time?
It comes down to a psychological phenomenon known as anchoring bias.
Anchoring bias.
If you read a famous pastor or a brilliant scholar's commentary before you observe the text yourself, your brain naturally anchors to their interpretation.
Oh, I see.
Once that anchor is dropped, it becomes psychologically nearly impossible for you to observe the text objectively. Your brain will only look for evidence that proves the expert right.
So you stop seeing what the text actually says.
Yes, you will only see what the commentary told you it says.
Wow, so jumping straight to a commentary isn't just a shortcut. It actively disables your brain's ability to observe. If you go to the commentary first, you are completely ignoring the text itself.
Exactly, and that is why the guide lists going to a commentary first as a major interpretive error.
Looking at this whole traffic light system, it is incredibly empowering for the listener.
It really is.
The entire hierarchy isn't just a set of arbitrary rules. It is designed specifically to build your confidence in your own observation. It's actively trying to prevent you from outsourcing your thinking to a Google search or a celebrity pastor.
Yeah.
If you are sitting there with your morning coffee feeling inadequate, this system is telling you, no, you have the tools. You can look at the context. You can track the syntax road signs. You can do this.
It truly democratizes the text. It removes the absolute need for a specialized, graduate-level intermediary to tell you what to think.
Which is huge.
When you do the hard work yourself, when you discover the meaning rather than having it spoon-fed to you. It roots that knowledge so much deeper in your mind. It transforms you from a passive consumer into an active student.
Okay, as we start to wrap this deep dive up, let's quickly recap the pitfalls. What are the 4 major common mistakes the guide warns us to avoid so we don't end up lost in the weeds?
So the guide highlights 4 major errors. First, studying a verse in isolation, which means you are ignoring the context.
Right.
Second, jumping straight to a commentary, which means you are ignoring the text itself.
The red light.
Third, missing the road signs you found during observation, which means you are ignoring syntax. And finally, reading your own personal ideas into the passage, which completely violates the ultimate goal of discovering authorial intent.
It is a tight, highly logical framework. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought to mull over today.
Oh, I like this.
The very first point in the source material, the very first step in that communication chain we discussed, mentions that we depend on the Holy Spirit to guide us into truth.
Right.
How fascinating is it that this deeply spiritual, invisible guidance is meant to be paired with such a rigorous, logical, traffic light analytical process?
It really is an amazing dynamic.
It's not either, it's both. The guidance of the Spirit doesn't replace the need to understand grammar and context. It works through them. So I invite you to explore that beautiful paradox the next time you sit down to read the text.
You know how to map the neighborhood, you can read the road signs, and you are ready to reach the actual destination.
Exactly. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We'll see you next time.